You ready for this? It's going to be fun. We have the big stage, y'all. I think I am the first non-Xamarin speaker on this stage. What's up? Hey, would everybody wave at me? Can I get a picture of this? This is crazy. Or do I need to do a selfie? Is that what you need to do? Everybody's waving. I got to back up. You guys are too close to the camera. Check that out. All right, now I got to do the selfie. All right. I don't. Well, see, now I can't see it, so I got to turn around like this and do all this. What's up, everybody? Yeah. All right, cool. Hey, that's me. I don't have a beard anymore. Can you believe that? I know you're like, I'm going to this dude's session because he's got an amazing beard. OK, so I have a clicker. I can walk. So we're going to be talking about UX patterns for cross-platform mobile. Any designers in the crowd? Designers, 2 of you, 3, 4. Developers? All right, sweet. So I do a lot of both. But I gear my stuff towards the developer crowd. So I work a lot with UX. We have my company is Render. My partner, Ben Bishop, I think is back there waving. So we founded our company back in April, and we partner with Teresa Neal Design, Strategy and Design, who's a fantastic UX professional, expert, awesome team of people. So this is something very near and dear to our hearts. And interestingly, you heard a lot about this morning. So just quickly about me, I was working with a startup called This Life. Anybody familiar with This Life? Anybody from the Bay Area? You might actually know what it is. Oh, we got one hand in the back. So This Life is a photo video startup. Helps you organize your stuff in the cloud. And then a year ago, January, we were acquired by Shutterfly. So I've been a part of the small startup scene and then gone into being part of a major company scene. Shutterfly is a fantastic company. This Life is going strong. My contract with them actually just ended last week, so I'm free as a bird. And everything we're doing is going into Render and really pushing the Xamarin products and trying to get people on board with that. So as I mentioned, Render is our company, so we work a lot with startups. We'll work with anybody that wants to do mobile apps pretty much. We also do Objective-C, we do Java, but we really push the Xamarin stuff because we love it. We think it's amazing. So Nike, LLS, and then some startups, all that kind of stuff. So, but you're not here for that. You're here for this. So did you hear Florin say this morning when he was being interviewed? You live or die by the experience you give your customers. Is that true? Yes, unless you have that captive audience that was mentioned. I thought that was fantastic. And then Rod Smith with IBM says, as we talk to customers, he kept saying that phrase over and over and over again. And I understand that we're developers, right? And so we're primarily interfacing with our IDEs. We're coding, we're programming. We are more familiar with APIs than we are with people. People are weird, people are messy. We don't really want to go sit in those meetings, you know what I'm saying? But he kept saying, as we talk to customers, and it really reinforced that they are focused on the people that they're working with. And he said, he made this statement about Xamarin as a community, that we're maniacally focused on great user experiences. True? What I love about the Xamarin platform is that you create unique user interfaces, UI, for each platform. I came from, I started way back doing ASP and Access and SQL Server. And then I had this period of about, 10, 12 years where I was doing Flash and Flex. Any Flash Flexers in the crowd? All right, my people. So you came to the right place, right? You came to Xamarin because you got burned by trying to create one UI that worked for everybody. And what you ended up doing was creating a substandard user experience. So with Xamarin, you get to take it to the top, the best you possibly can do, and still share a ton of code. It's so much better in so many ways. I don't really need to preach the Xamarin gospel to you. You're here. So, all right, so what's a UX pattern? So when you want to understand something, you, of course, need a Venn diagram. So the user needs, business goals, and tech constraints, where all those things overlap, that's what user experience is, right? Maybe. So let's add some different circles in here. HTML, graphic design, content strategy, and copywriting. This is what makes up user experience, right? Yeah, there's a no. We need more circles. So code and design, storytelling, all this stuff, that's what makes up user experience, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If it was prettier, maybe it would make more sense to me, so let's put some design to it. But really, it's about as useful as this Venn diagram, which tells me that Kim Kardashian is a drama queen. Didn't need a Venn diagram for that, did I? All right, so the concept of a pattern is probably not foreign to most of us, but it actually comes from architecture, where Christopher Alexander said, and I believe this is back in the 70s, or look at it's on Wikipedia. He basically was saying, you see common problems, you encounter these problems all the time. What are some common solutions that we can use to solve those problems? Let's codify that as patterns. And the interesting part I like of this quote, it says, without ever doing it the same way twice. I feel like I'm shouting. Am I shouting? If we understand the fundamentals of what's going on with the user, what's going on with the interface, what the problem really is. I used to work for a guy who he just preached, work the problem, and that's how you find a solution. If we understand the fundamentals of these things, then we can supply solutions that may not look exactly like the prescribed solutions. It may not look like a pattern in the sense of you just cut along the dotted line, but it solves the solution because it firmly understands the problem, right? So that's what I really want to get to in talking about UX patterns. So let's lay a little bit more groundwork here. User experience versus UI, because these terms get interchanged a lot, right? Have you ever talked to somebody who's a UX designer and you ask them what they do, and then you meet somebody else who's a UX designer and you ask them what they do? Everybody's got UX after their title, and so it's almost lost its real meaning here. But suffice it to say, UX is more of a holistic descriptor, right? It's what is the whole thing doing all together? The content strategy, the information architecture, the technology being used, the design being used, whether it's colors or fonts or all that stuff. When it's all brought together, that's your user experience. Your UI, on the other hand, gets informed by that user experience and decides how should we present this to the user? In what way do we need to implement this? Then it describes mostly visual design and the tactical actual execution of that stuff, right? Who's with me? All right, cool. I like interaction, so in case you didn't notice. Oh, and by the way, get ready. Some of y'all are joining me up on stage a little bit later. It's the big stage. We have to do it. All right, so how would this go? So a UX designer might say, okay, Jane needs to be able to see, and she does some wireframing, because UX, wireframing, sketching, a lot of that's what they do. So they meet with the user, they observe the user, they're saying, what is it that Jane really needs? Jane needs to be able to see her news feed. She needs to be able to see her recent follows. She needs to be able to see some statistics. And then she's also occasionally going to need to be able to get into her profile, check her, change her password, that sort of thing, occasionally. So that's what the UX person says. The UI designer comes in and says, okay, fantastic. We're going to make it pretty, and we're going to give them a navigation bar. It's going to be tabs. And on iOS, we'll put it at the bottom because that's the convention for iOS, right? And on Android, we'll put it at the top. So they'll be able to quickly get to news feed, follows, and then we'll have overflow so that they can get to other screens to achieve, the account, change email, change password, and all that stuff. So then the developer comes in and says, okay, fantastic. Take all that in. I'm going to use a UI tab bar controller on iOS. I'm going to use the action bar with tabs on Android. Or I might just use Xamarin.Forms for the win. What's up? Woot. Right? This is how the flow generally goes. Now, in that flow I just described, it's very linear. I would suggest that it doesn't need to be linear in that way. I would suggest that developers can get much better at what we do when we get as close to that user as possible. When we can understand them by observation, by talking to them. We build empathy with the people that are using our applications, right? And that helps us to perhaps not cut certain corners and to deliver a better user experience. I love this picture. I think this is fantastic. Design versus user experience. If we find ourselves in a situation where our apps start to look like this, we need to ask ourselves, what's wrong with my design? The good news is you don't have to rip up a concrete path to fix the design of your apps. But if you see that users are constantly going that way, that should tell you something, right? We can do better. All right, so let's talk a little bit about culture. We're going to talk about iOS and Android, and maybe this would be a good time to bring some people up. Who loves Android, loves their phone? Anybody? There's got to be one of you in here. Seriously. All right, would you come up here, please? And iOS, love your phone, maybe had one since iPhone 1, would not go to Android if somebody paid you big money. Anybody? I'm not embarrassing anybody. Come on, somebody's pointing over here. Yeah, get him up here. Come on, dude. All right, steps are over here. So how many of you know that these two might get along, but they are not the same person, are they? All right, come on up. Tell everybody your name.
Jason.
Jason, where are you from?
Chicago.
Chicago. All right, fantastic. And you are the Android.
Yes.
All right, so what is it that you love about Android?
The flexibility and just the overall kind of look and feel of the application. It feels more industrial.
More industrial. Okay, okay. Have you ever, I don't know why, I don't need to speak into the mic. Have you ever been tempted to go to iOS?
I actually did the iOS 6, iPhone 6
Okay.
for a week, just very recently, actually. When
Okay.
it came out, I bought it, tried it for a week, did not like it.
Did not like it and you went back?
Yes.
All right, Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, come on up. This is Mark. Well, I just told everybody your name.
Yeah, it's on here.
All right, so where are you from?
I'm from the UK, from Bristol.
And he has an accent, so we immediately got highbrow, you know what I'm saying? All right, so you've had iOS since?
The 3GS.
Since the 3GS, okay. And what is it you like about iPhone?
I like the actual consistency, the UI, and it's cool.
Okay, have you ever waited in line for an iPhone?
No,
No,
I'm not that bad.
No. I didn't wait in line either. I paid my little brother $50 to stand in line for the iPhone 1, and I gave him cash because I knew that he wasn't going to be able to use a credit card, and he got out first. All right, cool. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. So the point being that these are very different desires, right? These guys they're looking for different things. And if I build one UI to try to satisfy both of them, it's not going to work out. Somebody's going to be disappointed, if not both of them be disappointed, right? So what makes up culture? So real quick, when it comes specifically to iOS and Android, which one's iOS, the top or the bottom? The top. Okay, do you guys know what these icons mean? All right, I don't have a laser pointer, but the one on the left with the arrow pointing up, share, action. The one in the middle, bookmark. And the third one is pages, I think. Yeah, it's like a Safari thing. And then Android, which, okay, so I carry a Windows Phone, Android phone, and an iPhone. I'm currently using my iPhone, but I try to spend time with each of them. So the one on the far left for Android, you clear, dismiss all. The one in the middle, account, quick settings is what they call it. And the one on the far right, yeah, I couldn't quite hear anybody, but like more, overflow. So the thing is, these are very different. And if you don't understand that the iconography of that and the symbols of each platform is different, you can get into real trouble when you're designing for those platforms. Language defines a culture. So, these terms are, if you start talking about dips, no, I'm not talking about you, but you start talking about dips for iOS, so they're going to look at you like, what are you talking about? But Android guys, yeah, I know what a dip is. Values. He said he never waited in line for an iPhone, but have you ever seen an Android owner do that? It's like, I got it, guys. I got it. Ah! And then he opens it and it's on the ground, right? You've seen the videos. Happens every year, man. Oh, I'm so excited. Ah. This defines something interesting and unique about the iPhone. Now, not everybody, right? I mean, we're not all like salivating quite like that, but that exists, right? And if we're going to really empathize and understand the people that we're building these apps for, then we need to understand this about them. Norms. So anybody know how to take an iPhone screenshot? Yeah, pretty simple, right? The power button's on the side now. So that got awkward. But power button and the home button. Android? Yeah, volume down and power unless you have certain devices, right? It's not the same everywhere. But yeah, that's generally how it works. These are the norms. When you know this, you're in. That's the culture. Sanctions are part of a culture. Does anybody know what this is? This is the prototype or the design for the Apple mothership, right? I mean, this just screams sanctions. It says, you do it our way because we are the future and we can take off like a spaceship. So, but it's the rules. It's the enforcement of those norms and those values, right, that determines that culture. Understanding a platform culture, really, when you boil it all down, it's about understanding people. And I know as developers, we're like, dude, I don't want to talk to people. Well, you don't necessarily have to talk to them, but you at least need to be interested in them, right? So what people specifically are we talking about when it comes to deciding what UX patterns to use? The first person that we need to be interested in is you. Have you ever been in a meeting and you're talking about, well, what should we do here? We have a UX problem of some kind, right? We know that users aren't clicking the save button. We thought we could put it at the bottom of the form. Should we put it in the top right corner of the navigation bar or the action bar? What should we do? And then invariably somebody says, well, I would expect, right? Have you heard this? Well, I would expect it to go here. Or I would expect it to be here. Or I would expect after I click this button for the screen to go here. That's completely valid. Not a problem. You are a user. But, I left my clicker. But you are not the only user of your application, right? So let's just open up to the possibility that your point of view is one of many points of view. And you might be surprised that your users will not use the application in the same way that you intend them to, or in the same way that you would. I understand. Who would say, I am a rational person? Yeah? Who would say, I am not a rational person? Okay, stay away from me. We are. But man, I tell you what, people are weird and people are different and they're going to do things you never expected. I remember when I was working for a healthcare claims insurance software company and I had a member portal and they would call with a problem. And so, you know, we asked them to describe the problem and like GoToMeeting was brand spanking new. So we were like, hey, let's try this. How about I do a GoToMeeting and I just watch them use the application? And then I watch them and they're clicking stuff. I was like, I had no idea you were clicking that. Or I didn't know you were clicking it in that order. That's amazing. So that's what I love about the insights stuff. You saw that this morning? Dude, you're going to be able to see playback of that stuff. It's going to be fantastic. I keep walking over there, but I have this in my hand. Okay, one other point I want to make before I leave this. There's a race going on between these guys. And I simply want to say, don't fall prey to fighting their battles for them. Apple wants you to do a certain thing. Android wants you to do a certain thing. These guys are, and Microsoft, they're selling their platform, right? We don't work for them. Well, some of you might work for them. I don't work for them. I just want, somebody might. I don't work for them, and so what I always think of is this, is I fight for the users, right? You can't say I fight for the users and not put Tron on the screen. It's just not possible. Everybody's got it in their head already. Might as well put it on the screen. But seriously, we don't work for Apple, Google, and Microsoft. We owe it to, yes, we have allegiances to our product owners, to our clients, to our the people that are invested. But really, it's the users. If we take care of the users and the people that are using our stuff, everything else takes care of itself. It really does. All right, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I had to figure out if that clock was counting up or down. Let's talk about some patterns, okay? So keep in mind when it comes to patterns that it's about the user experience, understanding both your application and understanding the culture and the people that you're going to be working for. So we're going to talk about back, because you can't talk about iOS versus Android without talking about back. We're going to talk about navigation, form controls, lists, gestures, and onboarding. Cool? All right, so back. I think in the past month, 62.6 million users downloaded an app on iPhone, 76.1 million users downloaded an app on Android. Those are just people that downloaded apps, okay? So that means that there are a lot more people that are not downloading apps, and I have a screen at the end that kind of shows you what those numbers look like. A lot of people are not downloading apps. So you've got 76.1 people who expect there to be a back button, but they may not know what that back button does. So here's a really interesting story from Pocket, if you know this kind of read later service, right? So they found that in one of the iterations of their designs, if you see in the before, the upper left-hand corner is a check mark. What that check mark does to your article that you're reading is it archives it. And so what they were finding is that people would go to an article, and then they would want to get out of the article and go back. So they would hit the upper left-hand corner. And what would happen was it would archive the article, remove it from their list of articles, and bring them back to the main list. They wanted to be back on the main list. That wasn't a big surprise. But they did not expect their article to disappear. So when they figured this out, they decided, well, people really should just be using the back button. But how many of you know the back button is not the same as the up button? What Android calls that button in the upper left-hand corner that has the chevron to the left, it's called up. Okay, it's not called back. Back button is the actual, either a hardware key or the key at the bottom. Back goes back through the history of views, regardless of application, regardless of whatever. Because on Android, every view is pretty much its own application, right? It's an activity. It's doing its own thing. It's got its own life cycle and everything. So once they figured this out, they solved it by actually following what the user was doing instead of, you know, with that picture I showed earlier with the path on the grass. What do some people do? They just put up a sign that says, keep off the grass, right? They could have put up a sign that said, keep off the grass, but they didn't. They were smart about it. And they said, well, if users are doing this expecting one thing, let's just move things around. We'll make that the back button, and it'll do primarily the same thing as the actual Android back button, and we're good to go, right? So that's a good example of listening to users and responding appropriately. All right, so when it comes to navigation, for me, navigation is one of the main things that we always deliberate when it comes to a new application, a new design. So we'll talk about some of the different ways in which you can solve navigation issues. So Walgreens is an example where they're using what's called the Springboard. Same name as the iOS homepage, similar to Android as well. And then on Windows Phone, you get the tile. It's essentially a springboard. So basically what you're saying is, I want to show the user at a glance everything they can do, right? I can go to pharmacy, photo, store locator. I can refill by scan, scanner, blah, blah, blah. Everything I can do is on this screen. It's the same on iOS and same on Android. Works in both places. It's understood in both places. No problem. That works well if you have information that is very drilled down linear in this way. Obviously, they don't have a lot of crosstalk between these areas of their applications. The list menu works very much in the same way. It's just that instead of making it a grid of icons, it's now a list. So Kayak is a good example of this, where you can do a hotel, a flight, car, a trip, right? And these are all drill downs. This is a hierarchical structure. So if your content is very hierarchical, then this kind of organization may make sense for your application. Dropbox uses the tab menu, which is one of my favorites. So each tab within this navigation is basically a silo of information, but by keeping the tab locked at the bottom or the top of the screen, you're basically saying, I understand that the user may need to be able to get to any of these pieces of information at any time, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy of another section, right? So we find ourselves using this one a lot. Interesting story, and we'll get to, well, I'll save that story for later, because I have another slide coming. But you will notice on this that the iOS convention is that the tab is at the bottom, right? Android, the convention is at the top. If you go to Android and you're putting the tabs at the bottom, you're going to kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I have a picture of myself in Moscow back in the mid-90s in Red Square, and my wife and I are standing there, and I am wearing a bright orange coat. Has anybody ever been to Moscow? What color do they wear in Moscow? I'm going to go with black. Everything was dark, black, gray, dark. And here I am, orange, saying, hi, I'm an American. It was awesome. Okay, so you don't want to be that guy on Android. Another navigation pattern that is common is the dashboard. So with a dashboard, what you're doing, and Fitbit's another good example of this, Starbucks is a good example. Essentially what you're doing is you're bringing metrics up that are important to the user. As a Starbucks user, I like to be able to see my rewards, did you know that you're supposed to tell them before you order that you're actually using a reward when you go to Starbucks? Did you know that? Like, I thought that if I just scan my phone, that it would just use the rewards until they're all gone, right? Wouldn't that be silly? Yeah. Somebody needs to talk. Anybody here work for Starbucks? Can you make that happen? So with a dashboard, you're bringing your information up to the top. Fitbit, if there are any Fitbit users, Nike Fuel, those kinds of apps, Mint, any financial app, those are good examples generally of this, where your home page is a bunch of information about your account, about your usage, and it gives you a nice graph or something like that. And then you can tap into that and drill down hierarchically into the details of that. What I like about this pattern, and where I see this pattern being used a lot more, is because this is really catering to the user. It's an understanding the user. What is Jane, what is David, me? What does he care about? What does he need to see when he opens this app? He's going to need to do a couple of things. He's going to need to pay, and he's going to want to know what his rewards are. And that's pretty true. That's really all I care about. And for the most part, I'm using Passbook anyway, but it looks at the content, and it considers carefully the tasks that the user primarily wants to achieve. And that's how it defines its UI. And I think that is a trend that I see more and more of, and it's good. Gallery. So Gallery, obviously BBC News. A lot of news sites do this. Flipboard, I think, to a degree, does this. So essentially what you're saying is the content is the navigation, right? This is the content. I've organized it a little bit, top stories, US and Canada, et cetera. And again, very consistent UIs between iOS and Android. Not a whole lot different here, so that's great. And then we have this. Does anybody know what this is? It's the hamburger. People love to rail on the hamburger, don't they? Why does everybody hate the hamburger? Here's the interesting thing about the hamburger. Hamburger's been around a long time. Do you know where it first appeared? Xerox Star. Yeah, I heard that. It first appeared on the Xerox back in the 70s. I've got a note here. Hang on. Or is it on the previous screen? Yeah, Xerox Star, 1981. Norm Cox was the designer. So people hate this thing. There's whole blogs dedicated to why you should never use a hamburger icon for any reason. Well, here's the thing, right? Okay, so some user studies happened and said that you should not use the hamburger icon to go to a menu, to go to a list, whatever, because people don't know what it is and they don't know how to use it. So here's the thing about culture. Do you remember when email wasn't an English language word? Anybody remember that? It's a word now, isn't it? Any other words you can think of that were not words but now are? Did you say cellophane? Oh, selfie. Yeah, selfie. I'm like, cellophane. Just got weird. You didn't say it. It was my ears. Yeah, so people change. Culture changes, okay? So just because, and things are moving very quickly now, aren't they? So just because a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago or a year ago, nobody knew what to do with a certain button. Like, dude, nobody knew to pull to refresh. Now everybody's like, why can't I pull to refresh? You know what I'm saying? So be aware that culture changes, things change. And just be aware, are you challenging people to do new gestures and new things, or are you riding on the shoulders of somebody else? How closely behind the bleeding edge do you need to go? I find that we have used, in our applications, we've used the hamburger, and it's really not a big deal. People don't complain about it. They know how to use it. Now, where the hamburger gets people into trouble is if you're hiding things off screen that are important, that are notifications, that people need to be able to see readily, they probably shouldn't be off screen, okay? So it's more of an information architecture thing. Should that information be off screen, or does it need to be present on the screen because it has relevant information or timely information that users need to be able to visually see? Because out of sight, out of mind. The question I come up with is, if they never knew it was there, could they still use the app? And if the answer is yes, then fine. If that's where you want to put it there. All right. So some examples of the off-canvas. Amazon does it slightly differently. You tend to see it, you saw it in the earlier Facebook version where it slides in from the left. You can see that with Google Docs, which is the blue one. MyDM, which is one of our apps for San Francisco Bay Area parents of students in public or private school. It aggregates all your calendar information. We use it there. Amazon does it a little bit differently in that when you hit that button, it actually creates an overlay. So that's another pattern that you see being used. But essentially, all of these are simply off-canvas things. So again, just ask yourself, could I do this without the user ever knowing it was there? All right, 13 minutes, here we go. Segmented versus spinner. This is one of those interesting convention things between iOS and Android that is different. So a segmented bar on iOS is the month, week, day bar, right? And each time I tap that, it's going to change how my list looks or how my view looks. If you do that on Android, you're going to use what they call a spinner, which is basically a popover like that, right? And you're going to change it that way. So you're not going to achieve the same thing. If you put a segmented bar into an Android app, again, orange coat in Moscow in the winter. Lists. Lists are fairly straightforward. A list is a list, right? From an implementation standpoint, there are some differences. So on iOS, you're going to get a lot of things, quote unquote, for free, right? You're going to get the grouping, the reordering, where you can drag things up and down and sort them. The edit mode, where you automatically get the ability to delete and you get some icons and some help. Animations for when you're inserting things into a list and removing things from the list. All those things you kind of get for free in iOS. On Android, instead of a UI table view, you're using a list view. Instead of a table source, you're using a data adapter. And depending on what kind of data source you have, that adapter can change. You're using views instead of UI table items. On Android, you can do grouping, reorder, edit mode, animations, but you're pretty much going to be scouring GitHub for the best third-party solution, something open source that you can implement, right? Last I heard, that stuff was not baked into the Android SDK. Gestures. So there are some gesture differences. So just to highlight a couple. So I love to swipe on table rows and see what happens, because it could be fun. You could find something interesting, right? So I used to use Tweety, and now I use Tweetbot, and those are always good. If I go into a mail application and I can't swipe to do something to it, it's irritating. Mailbox, right? You can, as many fingers as you can get on that screen in Mailbox, you can grab all that stuff and archive it all at once. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? All right, come on now, y'all. I need to ramp up the energy. So the swipe thing. Now, this application you're looking at right now is one that we're doing in private beta for a client. It's basically giving you some quick actions, right? So if you swipe one way and then swipe the other way, you get different actions. Hey, Ben, who was the guy that did this? You don't remember his name? If you're here, the dude that wrote this for Xamarin, or you ported it, come talk to me. I have to shake your hand and buy you a beverage. Because right before we delivered this feature, somebody open sourced it for the Xamarin community. I was like, sweet. As Ben said, procrastination pays off again. But essentially, if nobody ever found those features, no problem. Because when you go to the next screen, they're all available at the bottom of the screen, all with icons and labels. There's no guesswork involved. But to make it easy, they're all right there under the quick actions. So that's the swipe gesture. This is the long press gesture. Anybody familiar with long press? So, yeah. So what I'm showing here is that when you want to go change something like your wallpaper, or you want to change something like settings on your Wi-Fi network, what I like to do when I'm doing stuff is I use Charles Proxy so I can see all of my network connection stuff going on, and then I'll get on my device and I'll proxy everything through Charles on my machine. If you've not done that, that's a free tip, not part of the presentation. That's a freebie. So to do that, though, there's no way for me to get to the modify network on my network unless I long press on it. It's a very hidden, obscure gesture. It's pretty unique to Android, although I think that, I mean, you can use it anywhere. I'm pretty sure everybody supports it. But it's pretty unique to Android. So it's something to be aware of. If you're looking for other gestures to use in your applications, long press is going to be more prevalent on Android. But it's one of those hidden things. People don't know it's there. So how are you going to tell them it's there? You can't be so sneaky about it that people really miss out on the value of your app. All right, onboarding, real quick. So onboarding has become hugely popular, right? How do I get people into my application and show them how to use it? So research has been showing recently that tutorials, videos before your app, overlays, things like this, for the most part, don't work. People don't like them. They don't read them. When's the last time that you actually read the terms and conditions to anything you signed up for? Yeah? No, I don't read them. I know, I'm bad. You guys all read them, don't you? Yeah, you're better than me. People don't read them. And so that's the problem. So how can we do better with our onboarding? A lot of text, not a good idea. Long video, not a good idea. So user testing shows that the people skip them. At worst, they find them a minor inconvenience, or at best, at worst, they significantly aggravate users. A very good article about this on Smashing Magazine from Teresa Neal, who I mentioned earlier, Rethinking Mobile Tutorials. So how to improve on that? Mailbox is a great example where it's teaching you how to use the app by walking you through it. You interactively have to swipe these things, right? So you're engaging the user into how to use your application. You're not just telling them, you're not just showing them, you're engaging them. And this is very useful. And this has been showing really good results. Takes a little more effort on our part, but it's good. So top line, less text. Don't front load with a bunch of information. If people don't need to know what front loading means is, if they don't need to know how to do some advanced thing, don't include that in the tutorial or the upfront information, right? Think about gaming, right? On the first level of Mario, you don't have to do all the advanced stuff that you need to be able to do later. All you need to know is what you need to do to get through the first level. And then the second level might introduce something new to you. You know, suddenly there's a mushroom, or suddenly you can shoot fireballs, or suddenly you get the flower that makes you run really fast, right? Those things come later, and they come in stages. Do what you can do to not front load with all that stuff. Make it fun and rewarding, obviously. Reinforce learning through play, listening to your players or your users. We really need to listen to them more. So how do you choose a pattern? So I've laid out a bunch of stuff for you, and you're like, okay, great, how do I choose these things? There's some great statistics and reports out there that kind of give you a lot of information about how people are using their apps, how people are using their phones, how people are using their devices. ComScore has some really good reports out. Interesting. 6 brands account for 9 of the top 10 most used apps, 16 of the top 25. Most people are only using a few apps on their phone, right? So those apps, if you look at this is number of users. Facebook, YouTube, Google, Pandora, Gmail, Instagram, Apple Maps, Yahoo, right? So if you want to see where people's eyeballs are going right now and what patterns they're being reinforced on a regular basis, so you can kind of follow quickly after them and say, well, if most people use Facebook and Facebook is using this pattern, I'm probably safe in using this pattern. That's one way to go in choosing a pattern, right? So here's what these look like. iOS on the top, Android on the bottom, very similar. Not a lot of differences between them. Of course, once you get into the mapping applications, suddenly a lot of these UX patterns we've been talking about are kind of off the table. But when it comes to, you know, Instagram and some of these others, and you'll notice, I found this kind of interesting. Okay, so here's my story about the menu, the hamburger. So Teresa Neal, one of her clients, was talking to Apple about helping to cross-promote their application that they had written. And Apple basically said to them, well, you're using the side menu with the hamburger button, and that's not a pattern that we condone. So if you want us to help you, you need to change to a tab bar. So keep in mind, if you want Apple's support and help, unless you suddenly have an influx of massive users to sway the entire community, they're going to want you to follow their patterns. interestingly about this screen, if you notice the use of the hamburgers, they're primarily Google, Yahoo, Apple competitors. Observe. Do what you can do to get around people using your application. Anybody. I mean, really, start with anybody. The less controlled of an environment, the better. As the quote from IBM earlier, when we talk to customers, talking to users is fantastic, but even better, observe them. Just hang around them. Be like a fly on the wall. Create an atmosphere whereby you can just shadow them, because you'll learn so much. People will say one thing because they're trying to articulate what's going through their head when they're doing something, but what they actually do is very often something different. I highly recommend Teresa Neal's book, Mobile Design Pattern Gallery. You'll recognize several examples from this presentation pulled from her stuff. We work closely with her. She's fantastic. Her whole team is fantastic. It makes everything that we do better. Xamarin.Forms, quick note about Xamarin.Forms. Xamarin.Forms is great in that, right, you can write one code, one UI code, and it goes everywhere. So, for example, this is one of the samples up on Xamarin's website. Chimpanzees, because chimpanzees and monkeys are big with us. Speaking of which, we have a framework called Monkey Arms. Best name ever. Nobody even cheered for that. Not even a snicker. You guys. You're like, dude, we're ready for the next session. You have 3 minutes. I have 3 minutes. You're sitting. Just kidding. You'll notice that the tab bars on iOS are at the bottom. The action bar buttons are at the top. Tabs are at the top. So Xamarin.Forms is doing that for you. You get that convention-based stuff for free. It understands the platform. So that's fantastic, but I would caution, make sure that it's not making your life easier as a developer, but making your user's experience worse, okay? We as developers, we as the people making the apps, developers, designers, owners, everybody, we can take the heat so that the user doesn't have to. I, as a developer, if my life needs to get a little bit harder and I need to do a little bit more work so that the user experience is better, I'm fine doing that. Like, I don't feel bad about doing work, especially when it's rewarding, okay? But if the platform or the technology that I'm using, dude, I used to be a flasher, okay? I used to write Flex. I used to write stuff once for everybody, and it never delivered. It was never as good as it could be. So I would rather spend the extra time writing a few extra views, whatever, if the experience is better. Can I get an amen? Amen. So in Xamarin.Forms, what does that look like? I'm not going deep into Xamarin.Forms because there's actually been quite a few sessions already, lots of training on it. But tab page does it all, right? Equivalence between iOS and Android real quick. It's pretty straightforward. If you put UI in front of it, it's an iOS thing. Take the UI away. It's probably an Android thing. And I'll make this available. There's also a great website that has examples of all that stuff on it. So this is a statistic that I'm going to leave you with. Something for you to consider as you're thinking about your apps and how you design them. Per month, 66% of users download no apps. There are 83.8 million Android subscribers. There are 67.4 million iPhone subscribers, which means 99.8 million subscribers are not downloading any apps. They've got their apps. They're my mom, you know. She's got her apps, and that's it. She's not looking for anything else. Consider, what UI patterns are you going to use that are going to be making it easier for those people? How are you going to engage those people? That's a huge market, right? That's like 100. That's a lot of people. How can we get those people to use our apps? I understand if you're an enterprise, that's not your target. But for some of us, that is our target. Dude, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of downloads. That's a lot of $1.99s or 99 cents in the App Store, right? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your time. It's been a lot of fun. Have you had fun? Did you learn anything? Cool. The counter just started going up. That means I get to start over? Is that what that means? I think we're out of time. We don't have time for questions, but I'll be off to the side. If anybody wants to come chat, I would love to talk. You guys can tell me what I said wrong. I appreciate your time, guys. Thanks.